reminder to keep yourself on mute because we are recording, and please stay on mute unless you're asking a question or sharing, because we want to limit background noise. So yeah, it's being recorded and it'll be shared with you afterwards. So today I have the pleasure of introducing Karina Schmittad, and I'm going to read her biography because it's very, very extensive. Karina has an amazing background. So after 12 years of nutrition research and improving on her own health, Karina pursued her certification in nutritional therapy and founded the Nourish Life practice to help others improve their quality of life through holistic health, nutrition, and lifestyle. Karina grew up with many health issues, such as eczema, allergies, digestive issues, and headaches. After several doctors had no answers because her labs looked normal, she decided to take her health into her own hands and learn all about the power of food on her health. Through this, she healed almost all her symptoms and feels healthier and happier than ever before. That's so awesome, Karina. Karina wanted to spread the knowledge with others, so she received her certification in nutritional therapy and founded the Nourish Life practice to help others feel their best and reduce unwanted symptoms through nourishing and balancing their bodies. Being a busy mom herself, her practice is focused on holistic health that is practical and sustainable, so it works with your own life and schedule. Karina's credentials are nutritional therapy practitioner through the Nutritional Therapy Association. She's also a restorative wellness practitioner through and a gut health specialist. She has her BS in kinesiology with emphasis on nutrition and wellness. And she's a former NASM personal trainer. What does NASM stand for, Karina?
Gosh, it's a personal trainer certification.
Okay.
I don't even remember. It was like 10 years ago now.
Okay. Personal
National,
trainer. We
yeah.
all know what that is.
Sports medicine. Yeah.
Okay. And then yeah, we're so happy to have you, Karina. And I
Thank
think we're ready for
you.
your presentation.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for showing up today. I'm gonna share my screen and hope this goes well because let's see. Give me just a second to get this set up. How does that look for you guys? Can you see it okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, today's talk is all about energy. So we're going to learn how to use food to increase energy and improve your sleep and balance your hormones. So before we get started, I wanted to do a quick icebreaker. I'm going to give you guys like 30 seconds to write down your typical breakfast that you eat. I recommend, on days that is, obviously like the holidays is not the best time to be writing your meals, your breakfast. So days, your typical breakfast.
Do you want us to put it in the chat or just in a notebook or paper?
If you're brave enough, you could put it in the chat, but this is a little bit just for your own reflection. And because at the end, we're going to talk about how to improve or tweak your breakfast to help increase energy. So,
okay, great.
It's more for just personal reflection. Okay, you can keep working on it if you need it, but I want to move on. So I'm going to teach you the how today, right? I'm going to teach you how to increase your energy, how to sleep better, how to balance your hormones. But before I give you the how, we need to reflect on what is your why. So my goal as a nutritionist is never to get you to have a perfect diet, to be, optimal health. My goal, I mean, of course, I want optimal health, but my goal is for you to really thrive in your life. And so, what we need to ask ourselves is why are we wanting more energy? And why do we want better sleep? And why do we want to balance our hormones? So this question I would love for you guys to put in the chat. What is your why? Like, why are you listening to this talk? You know, um, what are you hoping to get out of it, and why are you wanting that information? So again, I would love your guys' answers because this is the most important question we can actually ask ourselves when it comes to nutrition. I'll give you an example. So I was working with a client the other day and he's having a lot of headaches, right? So I asked him this question. I was like, what is your why? Why are we doing this gut protocol? And, I'm asking you a lot with, changing your diet and that, but what is your why? And he says, well, I don't want headaches anymore. And while that is like the start of the answer, but like, what are the headaches? How are they affecting his life, right? So he's a younger guy. He's, in his 20s. And so he goes, well, the other day I was spending time with my friends and my head hurt so bad I couldn't even like concentrate on the conversations with them, right? So that's his quality of life is reduced because of his symptoms. And so when we have the why, it's easier to apply the how. So let's see, I saw some chats here. Oh, I don't know why the chats aren't popping up.
You can have Roseanne. Roseanne can read them if you want.
Yeah, if you could. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Now you guys can all see him.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go.
So,
I see him here.
One why is to have a good quality of life for as long as I live and be active with my grandchildren. And
Nice.
a similar one,
Yeah.
more energy to be with and be active with my children, future grandchildren, friends, and community. Another one is to sleep better, to be able to do my work and enjoy life.
Amazing. Yeah.
And then,
Yeah. Looks like I see the chat now. That's awesome. Yeah. So really what we're trying to accomplish with nutrition is our quality of life. Yeah. So digestive issues. So I would, the next question, ask yourself where in your life is affected because the digestive issue. So again, I had a client who couldn't go on road trips because she always had to have a bathroom nearby. Right. So it's something to consider and ask yourself to really know your why, because that gives us a lot of answers with how far we want to go with improving our diet. Okay. So, my name's Karina, and I was very impressed, Roseanne. You got my first and last name correctly pronounced. So that's bonus points for that. Yes.
Thank you.
So again, I'm a functional nutritionist, but what I wanted to share with you is my why. So these are my wonderful kids. So my original really like falling in love with nutrition happened when I was younger. So I had eczema all my life. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I went to the doctor, and they said, you should try cutting out dairy because for some people that helps. And really that was the first time ever that someone has connected food with symptoms or health. And so I cut out dairy and 90% of my flare-ups with eczema went away. So it was like, whoa, this whole world opened up to me. And since then, I've been on a journey of like, how much can we do with food and how much can we really optimize and balance our bodies to thrive? So I really fell in love with nutrition. And then I had kids and I love my kids to death, but they are, talk about energy, right? Life gets really, really busy with kids. And at this point, I was eating pretty healthy. I was eating mostly whole foods, a lot of organic foods. Like I wasn't eating fast food or processed food. And I was still so tired. And I was like really kind of frustrated because I felt like I was doing all the right things and I was eating really well, and it didn't make sense why. Like, I had friends who would go to the zoo and then still come home and cook dinner for their kids and put their kids to bed and all these things. And I barely had the energy to even like get ready to go to the zoo. As you can see, like especially my girls are, I like to joke that they are, strong-willed daughters become women who change the world as long as you can hang on for the ride. Because they're so fun, and they really show me how exciting life can be, but it's a lot around them. Um, so this became my new why. Like, I wanted to be able to go to the zoo and still come home, and cook dinner for them. And knowing how powerful food was, I started to do a lot of research and figure out, even though it seems like I'm eating really healthy, why do I still have no energy? And so I did find my answer, and that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. So let me. So I'm going to talk about the how now. So just a disclaimer, this content is for informational or educational purposes only. It doesn't substitute professional medical advice. Okay. So first, if we're looking at energy, we need to start breaking down the food we eat. So there are 3 types of energy we get from food. The first one is fat. The second one is carbohydrates, and the third one is protein. So fat is seeds, nuts, avocados, oils. Those are good examples of fat. So yeah, peanut butter, almond butter, things like that. Those are like a slow burning log. So they don't really give us instant energy, but they burn for a long time and give us energy for a long time. Then we have carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are fruit, breads, pastas, all grains. I think that's a lot of them. You can put it in the chat if there's other ones. So oats, wheats, all sweets, sugars, things like that are carbohydrates. So what carbohydrates do is they give us energy quickly, and but then they burn out quickly, right? Just like a kindling. Now, this presentation is not to demonize carbohydrates. I just want to preface that because carbohydrates are actually our body's preferred source of energy. So our body prefers carbohydrates, but we're going to talk about how to use them properly. So the third source of energy is protein. So these are our macronutrients, right? So protein is not really our preferred source of energy. It's more just a backup. If we don't have enough carbohydrates and fat, our body will turn protein into energy for us. So, and protein is any animal meat, soy, beans, legumes, things like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese have a lot of protein in them. So those are some examples there. Okay, so carbohydrates is really where we start to be able to manipulate our energy levels. So again, carbohydrates are our preferred source of energy. So they're not bad for us. A lot of carbohydrates have a lot of nutrients in them. But I wanted to break apart, for those who like to geek out a little bit, we're going to kind of break apart a carbohydrate. Vegetables and fruit are also both carbohydrates, actually. But every carbohydrate has different ratios of starch and fiber. So fiber, we don't actually digest. Our gut bacteria feeds off of the fiber we eat. Starch is actually that energy source that I'm talking about. So while vegetables are technically a carb, they're very high in fiber and very low in starch. And so they're much more, there to feed our gut bugs than they are to give us energy. Whereas something like mango or pineapple or bread, or actually grapes are a really good example of that. They're much higher in starch and lower in fiber. So they're going to give us a lot more energy. So I am going to use the word carbohydrate, but what I really mean is the starch in carbohydrate. And so while, anything in nature is never as cut and dry as we like, so there are different levels of how much a carbohydrate affects our energy. One good, list would be like a glycemic index list, right? People who have diabetes tend to know that list. So generally, the higher the glycemic index, the more starch a food has in it. Okay, so what happens when we actually eat those carbs? So first it goes into our digestion. Our pancreas releases insulin and shuttles it into it releases insulin as the glucose goes into our blood. So glucose and blood sugar, those are the same, I use them interchangeably. They mean the same thing. It's basically the amount of sugar or that starch that we ate in our blood. So once our blood sugar goes up, so you can see breakfast, our blood sugar starts to go up, right? We see a peak. When that happens, our pancreas releases insulin and it shuttles it out of our blood into cells. So it goes into our liver, into our muscles, and any extra turn into triglycerides, which turn into fat. So as that happens, the curve goes down, right? That hill goes down. As we get hungry, our blood sugar goes up because we ate. And then our body's like, we need to keep our blood sugar steady. So it'll shuttle it back out. And so goes our day, right? We have these ups and downs, these peaks. So fun fact is that we actually don't need insulin to shuttle sugar into our muscles. So that's why strength training and muscle building has become so popular these days, because it's a really easy way to just soak up glucose. So the more muscle we have, the more we can actually keep these curves steady. So let's see, did I miss something? Okay, I think we're going to keep going here. So what happens when we eat too many carbs for what we need? So you can see here, are you guys able to see my mouse as I do this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. So this was like the slide before. This is like the optimal range at what we want to keep our blood sugar. And so just so you know, our body will prioritize stabilizing our blood sugar over most other functions in our body. It's a very tightly regulated system, and it works really hard to keep it at the optimal levels. So what happens is when we eat a meal that's very high in carbs, too much glucose goes into our blood at once. And then what happens is our body freaks out and says, oh boy, we got to get this out quick. And so it releases a lot of insulin, often overshooting the mark, and it drops too low. So as it drops too low, we start to have cravings. And those cravings usually lead to possibly more carbs or more sugar. And then our blood sugar goes up too high. And we start to have these spikes and crashes. And then we get put on what I call a blood sugar roller coaster. So when it starts to dip, we start to have a lot of cravings, and we also have energy crashes. When it's really high, our body says we need to store this, and we start storing fat. So I'll give you a real life example. This is a client that is tracking her blood sugar. So she has like this amazing smoothie in the morning, which we will talk about, a blood sugar regulating smoothie later on in this presentation. But she has that. You can see it's nice and stable here. Like that smoothie does really well for her. Now she went out to eat with some friends, and she had a sandwich and some chips and I think possibly a soda. Anyways, she had something that really didn't support her body too well. So she had a big spike. Her blood sugar went way up, and then her body worked really hard to get it back down. But what's fascinating is when you look at this bottom of the spike here, where this crash is, what she reports on this app that I use with my clients, she reports having a very exhausted day and she's just done. So it's fascinating, right? Like how much of our energy crashes or even, our mood issues are from being on this roller coaster. So not only is she having a bad day, she's needing energy. She has some hot chocolate. Her blood sugar goes up, it drops down. She has an orange, it goes up, crashes down. I don't remember what this is. I think it was some sweets, right? So this is a perfect example of a blood sugar roller coaster. So, I mentioned that the higher our blood sugar goes, the more insulin we produce. What starts to happen is we start having a lot of insulin in our blood. When we have a lot of insulin, it doesn't just go away like our blood sugar gets pooled out of our blood, but insulin has a much longer half-life and hangs around much longer in our blood. So we start to have this issue where we have a lot of insulin in our body. And insulin is known to increase inflammation. It throws off hormones. So this is kind of the hormone piece here. When we have a lot of insulin, we start to see increased testosterone in women and increased estrogen in men. It also affects our ability to detox, our liver detox, and we see higher blood pressure levels and cholesterol levels. Insulin is also a fat storing hormone. So when we have insulin, we are storing fat rather than burning fat. So the more insulin we have going around in our body, the more we're storing fat and not able to tap into stored energy, also known as fat. So that's what happens in the blood. I'm going to now talk about what happens in the cell. So this is my dad. Some of you guys might know him actually, but we have a garden and he grew potatoes. So that was really cool. It's been really fun. They live with us. So anyways, this is a fictional story, but I thought it'd be fun to pretend like he is the star of the show here. So my dad retired and his dream job was always working in a train. So he retired. He was so excited. He got a job as a train stoker. So a train stoker is the person who's in the cabin. They shuttle the coal into the fire to help produce the energy to help the train go. So he's so excited. He starts his first day of work. He, gets in the cabin. He gets a delivery of coal right when he needs it. And he's like, all right, let's get going on the day. So he starts shuttling the coal into the fire. It starts to get a little bit low, and the train's just chugging along. The coal's getting low. So he gets a knock on the door and he gets another delivery. And he's like, oh, perfect. Like I needed some more coal. We need to keep this fire going and keep the train moving. So, the day goes on like that, right? The coal starts to get low. He gets another delivery and it all works out perfect. The train goes until it gets to its destination. And he's like, this is the most amazing job. I can't believe I waited to retire to do this. Like, this is amazing. So it was a wonderful day. He had a great night's sleep and he was so excited to start the next day. So the next day, he, starts work. Again, he gets a delivery of coal. He's like, perfect. That's what I needed. Let's get this going. So he starts getting to work, shoveling the coal into the fire. Now, just a few minutes later, he gets another knock on the door, and it's another delivery of coal. And he's like, okay, well, I don't really need more coal, but sure, like put it over in the corner there. So he, okay, they deliver it. He gets back to work. Now he starts shoveling the coal. A few minutes later, he gets another delivery of coal. And he's like, sorry, like I actually don't need any coal. No, like I don't need that. And they're like, sorry, we have orders to drop it off no matter what. So you have to take this. And he's like, okay. The day goes on like that, where he just continues to get deliveries and deliveries and deliveries until the cabin becomes so full of coal that he's no longer able to stoke the fire. He's like, the cabin is so full, he doesn't have the space to take the coal and put it in the fire. And what happens? The train stops. Everyone's upset, and he's like, this is the worst job in the world. I quit. And he says, this is not what I want to do. So that is actually what happens to our cells when we continue to have too much glucose in our cells. Our body will again try to always keep our blood sugar stable, so it'll continue to shove glucose into our cells. And what happens is our mitochondria starts drowning in excess glucose, which causes the cell to actually die. This causes oxidative stress, and we start to see things like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. We also start to see a lot of inflammation in the brain with this too. And as those cells die faster than we want them to, we actually age faster than we want to, because the cells are dying at a faster rate. So, let's tie this back to how this affects our energy, right? Basically, everything I'm describing happens when we're eating too many carbs too quickly. So our body uses a lot of energy to keep these systems regulated, and it depletes a lot of nutrients as well, dealing with these spikes and crashes. High glucose leads to crashes, and those crashes are often, we start to have very low energy, and we start to make pretty bad choices with our food options, right? Oftentimes this happens in the afternoon. And then, longer term, too many carbs too quickly over time starts clogging the cells, and our cells are not able to use energy. So what does this look like in our bodies? What happens when we're dysregulated? Short term, the symptoms we see, or the day-to-day symptoms, we see waking up a few hours after falling to sleep. That's a really common one, usually because our blood sugar is dysregulated. It starts to drop, and our body says, like, emergency mode, we need to wake you up to get your blood sugar up. So we think we're actually, like, our body has to pee, but our body shuts off our need to go pee when we sleep. And so usually something else woke you up at night, and then as you're awake, you're like, oh yeah, actually I do have to pee. So interesting fact there. We also see cravings of sugar and caffeine in the afternoon. Hangry, you guys know what hangry is? Like, that has become a really common term. That's not normal. That was me very much. My whole family knew that I needed to eat often, or I was going to be a disaster. So, but hangry means we have very dysregulated blood sugar. So also headaches and shaky. We see a lot of mood swings and anxiety actually with a dysregulated blood sugar. And longer term, it really uses a lot of energy and nutrients for these spikes and crashes. And as I kind of mentioned before, we start to see hormonal imbalances. We see weight gain, aging, acne, and skin issues also, because we're throwing off our hormones, and we start to see our skin shows that. And depression and anxiety. There's a lot of research that shows depression and anxiety linked to dysregulated blood sugar. Okay, so I am going to give you the answer of how to regulate this, but first I would like to chat with you guys. So do you guys have any of these symptoms I talked about? And so you can put it in the chat. Have you ever noticed the connection of what you eat to your energy levels? And what meals come to mind that you feel tired after you eat? I'm going to work on getting my chat back up. There it goes. Oh boy. Still figuring out the Zoom. Okay, no one wants to respond. As you can tell, I'm not quite the Zoom expert here. Most of my talks are in person. Okay. Okay,
You want me to
crashes.
read?
Oh, I
Are
got
you
him. I got him. Yeah,
okay?
I'm just a little
Okay.
embarrassed that I can't quite get this. Yeah, it's all funny here. Okay. Up and down with energy. Yeah, crashes after 5 hours. Yeah, that sounds about right. So, Roseanne, you notice you have more energy when you eat lots of veggies. Yeah, so fiber definitely helps stabilize our energy. So quick energy with sweets and then crashing, totally avoiding sweets as much as possible, definitely. Yeah, so meals, if we have too many carbs at once, a lot of times it's after, and sometimes it's right away. We start to feel really tired, hangry. Amina, I see your hand up. Did you want to share something?
I was going to write mine in the chat, but
Oh,
I can as well say it.
yeah.
Yeah, these days I take a lot of tea and a lot of sweet things, which I never used to do. Never.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
tea, a lot
We
of
start to become, yeah, like for caffeine, you mean?
just even before I go to sleep, and I never used to do that. Never.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. We can really start to become dysregulated. So, yeah, I see waking up to need to go to the bathroom soon after I fall asleep. Yeah, so that's likely your blood sugar going down, which we're going to talk about how to
No,
stabilize
sleeping,
that.
I do sleep. I sleep very well, but
Okay, yeah, that was someone else responded to that
yeah.
one, but
Mm.
yeah, that's good. I'm glad yeah, sleep is so important. So Kendra says, I notice a lot of energy when I fast for 3 days. Yeah, we really start to get the stabilized energy there. For some people, fasting kind of never gives them energy, but that's awesome. Um, okay, so yeah, we can definitely, I think the first start to knowing what we need to do with our nutrition is knowing why we have the symptoms we have, right? And so that's always the first start. Okay, so how do we get off this roller coaster? Um, One is the main thing we want to do is eat carbs based on our activity level. So if we sit all day at a desk job, we probably don't need too much energy, right? We don't need too many carbs because we're not using it. And so instead, or if you consider someone who's like a farmer or works a very active job, they probably maybe could use more carbohydrates and their body uses it up faster. So we need to think first about what does your day-to-day look like and how active you are, and then start to play around with the carbohydrates based on that activity. We can also slow down that absorption. So kind of slowing down our digestion and that, again, the absorption into our blood by adding fat, fiber, and protein. So really, this is where we start to balance our plate. And we're going to talk about more details on that in a minute, but that one is huge. So the other thing is using the energy. In studies, they definitely find going for a walk after a meal helps keep that the glucose from rising too quick. And the slower it rises, the less our body needs to be producing insulin. They also found, interestingly, when we eat foods in a certain order, it again slows down that absorption of carbs or the glucose into our blood. So eating veggies and then protein and then your carbs at the end helps slow down the spike. The other thing is, sometimes, especially if we're conscious of how much we eat in a day and we want something sweet, we'll choose to have something sweet as a snack. But actually, when we have, carbs without the protein, fat, and fiber, it causes us to our blood sugar to spike much faster. So if you are going to have dessert or something sweet, having it after a meal will help it not spike your blood sugar as much. So how does this look like in real life? This is what I generally recommend for my clients. What I really want you to do is take this as a starting point and play around with it to see how you feel. So there is no cookie cutter answer when it comes to nutrition, and everyone is very individual on what they need, but this is a good starting point. So one of the things I see the most is most people are not eating enough protein. So protein is really helpful because it keeps us really satiated. It keeps us really full much longer. So adding more protein and adding more veggies, because veggies are very high in fiber and lower in that starchy, the starch that then goes to glucose. And then when it comes to carbs, there's a couple ways you can, measure. One is 20 to 40 grams of net carbs. So net carbs is you look at the nutrition label, you take the total amount of carbohydrates and you subtract the amount of fiber in it. So if something has 30 grams of carbohydrates but has 7 grams of fiber, then you're looking at a net of 23 grams of carbs, if that makes sense. So the more fiber it is, the slower the glucose goes into our blood. Thus, then we don't need to, shuttle it out as fast, right? We have time to use up that energy. And fat is also, healthy fat is also important. So when it comes to snacks and meal timing, ideally, for most people, we want to try to limit snacking as much as possible. Giving our body 3 or 4 hours between meals helps get our blood sugar stabilized before adding more food. I would say for most of us, the food that we snack on also tends to be pretty high in carbs in general. It's the chips and, popcorn or things that are pretty carb heavy. I also like to say no naked carbs. So anytime we have any type of carb, pairing it with fat, fiber, or protein. So if you're going to have toast, rather than just having it with jam, put some peanut butter on it. Or if you're going to have an apple, have peanut butter, adding hummus to things. Anytime we can add protein, fat, and fiber, we're going to slow down that absorption. And then dinner and done. So giving our body at least 3 hours before bed to help stabilize our blood sugar is going to help us sleep better. And I'm going to show you an example of that. So again, the timing we eat matters. So they did this study. So a study was done where people ate the same exact meal at 8:30 in the morning and then again at 8:30 at night. And there was a significantly higher glucose spike in the evening than there was in the morning. So we want to think about carbs as energy. And what do we need much energy at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night? Probably not, right? Unless you work a night job. But for most people, we want to eat carbs when we need to use the energy. So really pushing even our carb load a little bit earlier in the day is going to help us be able to stabilize it. So again, this is a client who is tracking her blood sugar, and you can see, so in the green is like where we want it at night, right? That's kind of our what we want our base fasting glucose to be. So she ate a meal around 6 p.m. Her blood sugar, went pretty high, dropped down, started going down, but then she had dessert. I think it was like caramel something or other. And then her blood sugar went up. And so that was like around 9 o'clock. And then for the rest of the night, her blood sugar was all like above where we want to see it, even until the morning. So this is when she ate later at night. And this was the next day. So again, she had her dinner around 6 p.m., but she didn't have that nighttime snack. And her blood sugar again was a little crazy all over the place. But then by about midnight, it was able to stabilize. And I don't show it here, but it was stable for the rest of the night. So again, like when our blood sugar is all over the place at night, then we start to have those crashes. We wake up. We just don't get as restful as of a sleep. So what does show about what I'm about reducing glucose spikes? So by reducing how much our glucose spikes, we are reducing free radicals, which means less inflammation. So studies show people have less depression, less risk, reduces the risk of Alzheimer's, it slows down aging, reducing heartburn and acid reflux. This is something that doesn't seem related at all, but it really does help. I use this a lot with clients that have heartburn. It reduces how quickly cancer grows, which is crazy. We start to have proper hunger cues when we balance our blood sugar, because then we eat when we're actually hungry, not when our body just thinks it needs energy. And we see improvement in joint and skin health because we are reducing the inflammation in our body. And then so on a personal note, like what are my clients saying when we start stabilizing their blood sugar? They say, I feel way less anxious and slow to upset. So I will say a lot of my clients are moms, and we all know that we need a lot of patience. And when we can reduce this anxiety or even our mood swings, we can be more present as a mom or as a parent. And so that's where a lot of my mom clients see a big benefit in stabilizing their blood sugar. They notice they fall asleep easier at night. Again, their mood is a lot less stressed out. And a big thing I hear over and over again, my mood is, or my energy is more balanced throughout the day. So rather than having a lot of energy in the morning and then crashes in the afternoon, they just have that nice, steady, balanced energy. Okay, so I mentioned we would come back to this smoothie, right? I want you guys to help me fix this smoothie. So you can put it in the chat. This is not a blood sugar regulated smoothie, and I want you guys to put in the chat what we can swap for this to help regulate our blood sugar and stabilize our energy. I'll see how well you guys are paying attention. Any ideas? Add some fat. Yep, totally. Nuts, seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, almond butter, peanut butter. I love peanut butter in my smoothies, totally. And it needs protein. Yeah. So protein powder could be really helpful here. Any other ideas? So one thing I like about this is that this is a pretty a whole food diet, right? It's a smoothie, right? This isn't processed, this isn't junk food. It's just it's just not balancing our blood sugar, right? So these ingredients with each one aren't necessarily bad. They're just it's a lot of energy all at once. So yeah, adding avocado for sure. So we've got protein, adding protein and adding fat, and avocado actually has a lot of fiber too. So a couple other things we could do here is swapping the oat milk. So oat milk has gotten really popular these days as the healthier option, but it's actually not very blood sugar rate regulating. Basically, what you're doing is taking the starch out of the oats and putting it with water. So it's a pretty big spike for blood sugar. So if you, I personally don't do well with dairy, so I go for, almond milk or coconut milk or something like that rather than oat milk. I thought you said, Patty, I thought you said canceled. I was like, yeah, we'll cancel a tropical fruit. Yeah, we can swap maybe the tropical fruit for berries. Berries are much higher in fiber and much lower in sugar. and lots of antioxidants. So I like swapping out that, tropical fruit for berries. We could cut the banana in half is another option. And yeah, I think we got it. So here's an example of a blood sugar balancing smoothie. So that client I had that had a smoothie, this is what she does every day. And she actually really struggles with regulating her blood sugar, and this one, works really well for her. So you guys can screenshot that if you want. Okay, now we are going to look back at your breakfast. So well, just take a minute here. You can pop it in the chat if you're brave enough, but I want you to really reflect on that breakfast, because breakfast is going to be the most important meal for blood sugar balance. When we start our day with a high spike, that will cause dysregulation. Like, we'll be on that roller coaster. We'll have the crash. We want sweets. We eat sweets, and it goes up and down and up and down. And it's much harder to regulate our blood sugar based on breakfast. So breakfast is the best place to start with regulating our blood sugar. While you guys, take a minute to look at this, we also, want to consider caffeine. So caffeine doesn't, it's not necessarily that it causes a blood sugar spike, but it does cause also that surge of energy. So I find for a lot of clients who struggle with regulating energy, having their coffee after a meal can make a big difference. Okay, we'll just keep moving here. So I wanted to share about a client of mine, because I think it's really cool to see what this looks like in real life. So to answer your question, Roseanne, a smoothie can be enough. What we want to make sure is that we're full until lunchtime. If we're starving by the time, we can barely make it to lunch, or we need something between breakfast and lunch, that means there wasn't enough in our smoothie. So that's really where like the fat comes in, or maybe more protein, more, spinach or mixed greens or something like that. Oh, you make your kids protein smoothies every day for breakfast. That's amazing. My kids really love it too. Yeah, frozen fruit. Yeah, I love frozen banana. I do like a half a banana, and then it makes it like so creamy. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this is Tom. This is a client I have. So he actually came to me for wanting to work on gut health, because he had acne that he went to many doctors, tried many different, steroids and antibiotics, and was not having any benefit or improvement in his acne. So while he came to me for acne, we started to see there was more going on. So he had acne, rosacea, he had headaches, joint pain, anxiety, sleep issues. Just a little bit about him. He's in his late 30s. He actually runs a multi-million-dollar company. So he had a ton of stress, but he really struggled with his skin issues because he traveled regularly, did a lot of business meetings, and his face was really, he had big cystic acne. So we always start with looking at a food journal with my clients. So he started his morning every day with 300 plus milligrams of caffeine. He said, so he would have that caffeine and then he would work out, but he found, having a little food in his stomach helped. So he would have bread with honey, straight white bread, pineapple, oranges. Do you guys start to see a picture here? His meals were pretty heavy in carbs, and he tended to eat late at night. Now, I will say, even though he ate a lot of carbs, he wasn't eating a lot of processed food. Like, he wasn't necessarily eating junk, or fast food, or he wasn't drinking sodas, things like that. They were pretty whole food based. They were just heavier in carbs. So we worked together. Let's see here. So we started by balancing his blood sugar, because of his size and everything. We went with 40 grams of protein, especially for breakfast, and we balanced his plate. So, you know, that slide I showed you with the, you know, the protein, the veggies, the fat, and a balanced amount of carbs for what he needed. Again, like he ran a business and he was sitting a lot of the time. So the amount of carbs he was eating wasn't necessarily what he needed. So we also switched his caffeine to after breakfast. He also moved his workouts later in the day so he could have a full breakfast and his caffeine later and then have his workout. So we also stopped eating 3 hours before bed. And he knew he was sensitive to dairy and corn, but still kind of ate it. So we cut that out for 3 months. Anybody under a lot of stress tends to be depleted in B vitamins and magnesium. So we did that. And I will say we did end up running a gut test on him, and surprisingly not much showed up. So usually when someone has skin issues, we'll see, you know, a pretty dysbiotic bacteria that's causing inflammation. All he really showed was that he had low healthy bacteria, so kind of not enough fiber in his diet. And so we did add some digestive support, probiotics, and just a lot of prebiotic foods, so foods with a lot of fiber. What was really cool is after 3 months, his skin was significantly better. So much less breakouts, smoothness. His wife noticed that like his complexion was much more clear, so the redness went away too. He noticed he wasn't having those afternoon slumps anymore. And was much more stable throughout the day. He always struggled with sleep, and while we still have more to go on that, he's still sleeping better than he ever remembers. His headaches are few and far between, and even when he gets them, they're much less, they don't last as long. His joint pain is pretty much non-existent. And again, he noticed a big difference. You know, he runs this big company and he noticed a big difference in his ability to handle stress. So it's pretty cool seeing this kind of transformation just by really working on diet. You know, we use the fancy tools like the gut testing and things like that, but a lot of times it just comes to balancing our plate and eating foods based on what we need. So one thing I work on in my practice is rarely do I ever tell people not to eat things. So most people, like he already knew he was probably drinking way too much caffeine. You know, when people drink soda or eat a lot of processed or fast food and things like that, I don't really work with them on cutting those out. What I work on is what do we add in instead? So while we were, you know, as we were working on regulating his blood sugar, he just had more energy and didn't need the amount of caffeine. So he cut down his caffeine without us necessarily that being a goal. But naturally, when we add things in, you know, the bad kind of gets filtered out, or the things that don't support us. So that was a really cool case. So I want to take all this and reflect again about the why. So I shared that my why, it's not just about having a perfect diet and perfect blood work and, all these things. My why is my family and being able to be active and live a long, healthy life. Like, I don't want to just live a long life. I want to live a long life well, with lots of energy and travel and, being able to do a lot of adventures with my family. So this was just a couple weeks ago. We went snowshoeing in Canada. That was really fun. I see some other people from Canada, so that's always nice to see. Yeah. So I love that, I could do this kind of thing. Like, I worked all day and then we went snowshoeing, right? Or I take the kids out and I still have the energy to come home and cook dinner. And so I love that by using food, I can control my mood and my energy and my life based on the choices I make with food. So my goal for myself and my clients is I want to live my life to the fullest, and I don't want to just survive. I want to thrive. So that is the end of my presentation. If you guys want to follow me on Instagram, or if you're interested in booking a call with me, you can use that QR code. But Otherwise, I finished a little early, so I'd love to open it up for questions.
There was one question earlier. Someone asked about foods that cause gas.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty individualized, but I will say a couple things on that. One is, um, how do we improve our digestion? If we have gas, that usually means food is like sitting in our gut too long. It's not totally related to this, but it means food is sitting in our gut. So how do we increase and have the right motility or speed in which digestion happens? So one thing that is related to carbs, which is very fascinating, is that in order for food to move from our stomach into our small intestines, it needs enough stomach acid. That's what triggers the opening of that valve. And so in order to have enough stomach acid, what triggers stomach acid is protein and fat. And so by adding protein and fat into our meals helps trigger the release of stomach acid, which helps trigger the release for food not to sit in our stomach too long. And so a lot of people tend to have gas, especially if it's like upper gas and like burping and stuff, that can be from too many carbs and not enough protein and fat. And food is sitting too long in our stomach, which is then fermenting and causing bloating. And that's kind of the idea behind heartburn. So other ways we can help increase motility is, really chewing our food well, avoiding drinking too much water during meals, because that reduces the acidity in our stomach, and trying not to multitask, because our brain really does tell us to produce these digestive enzymes and stomach acid. So we tend to be a very multitasking society. So really focusing on chewing our food well. I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay, so I can see my chat now. So Shauna said her kids don't eat a lot of breakfast before school. So my kids are, especially my oldest, is a little bit like that too. He's pretty groggy in the morning and doesn't like to eat. So what I would say is the most important is, rather than like the time, it's the meal we break our fast on. So whatever time the breakfast means to you, the most important is when they actually break their fast from the night, they're eating a protein rich breakfast, or fat, fiber, protein rich breakfast is going to make a huge difference. And this, honestly, everything I shared here makes a huge difference with kids. I notice when my daughter, if we're traveling or we start to eat a lot of carbs, she has so many more meltdowns. And so it really is a cause for kids. They aren't able to regulate their emotions like we are. And so you'll see a lot more fits with kids when they're dysregulated. Do you have any tips to help stop the habit of evening snacking? Is it okay to drink herbal tea instead of Diet Coke? Yeah, herbal tea is amazing. So if we're really hungry in the evening, there's a good chance we're not eating enough the rest of the day. So I'm not saying this is the case for you, Aunt Myrna, but what happens to a lot of women is we try to be good in the morning and eat a nice small breakfast with like an egg and a piece of toast. And then we eat our salad for lunch. And then by dinner, we're like starving, but then we start to get really hungry as the day goes on. So what I find is when we start eating more for breakfast and lunch, we find that we're not as hungry in the evening. So I would also look at, so kind of like I mentioned before, if we're really hungry shortly after a meal, it may be that our meals aren't big enough, or enough food, or the right ratio. And this is where protein is really helpful. When we increase protein, it really helps us stay full longer. And then the last thing is sometimes we just need to get used to not eating. Like our body also gets used to eating at certain times. And so like for me, I can tell you when it's 12 o'clock, not by looking at the time, but like my stomach starts crumbling. Like I know at 12 o'clock is my lunchtime and I'm hungry. So some of it's like our body needs to retrain in that way. Someone asked about the GI mapped gut test. Yeah, so I do, lots of different things in my practice, but I also do a lot for digestive health because that affects our whole body. So the GI map is a stool test, and you take a sample of your stool and you send it to the lab, and it looks at all different kinds of things. So it looks at your healthy gut bacteria, it looks for parasites, like fungus or candida type of things, lots of pathogens. Did I mention parasites? It also looks at inflammation and your digestive capacity. Are you digesting fat? Do you have enough digestive enzymes? Inflammation, things like that. So it's a pretty cool test to see what's going on underneath. When you say add fat, what avocados or what else? Yeah. Not dairy. To be honest, I am not against dairy. I think it's very individualized. Dairy tends to be something that a lot of people don't do well with. But if you seem to digest dairy fine, totally keep it in because dairy is actually very not so processed, especially if we do like a raw dairy or organic dairy. Like it's one ingredient, right? Compared to even almond milk that I drink. Like if I could drink dairy, or whole raw milk, I totally would, because almond milk has the gums and it's processed a lot more. So dairy is not inherently bad. A lot of people just don't do well with dairy. So that's where the individual piece goes. So dairy, if you tolerate it, is a great source of healthy fats too. So other types of fat, so any nuts and seeds. So like at our house, we do waffles, but we do it with almond flour instead of regular flour. So then it's a lot more, heavier in fat and less carbs. Yeah, so adding olive oil to your salad. Yeah, chia seeds, nuts. Am I missing anything, you guys? I feel like those are the main ones. So fat from dairy, nuts, seeds.
Eggs? Is eggs a good addition?
Eggs have some fat. Yeah, eggs have, especially the yolk has healthy fat.
What other seeds besides chia?
Other seeds, we have flax seeds, hemp seeds, sesame seeds. I think those are the main ones in the American diet, right? Yeah. So I don't know if you're thinking about smoothies, but my favorite is almond butter or peanut butter in smoothies. Those I think taste really good. Or I love putting pecans in my smoothies too. I really love pecans. I don't know what it is about pecans. I think they taste amazing. Yeah, writing things down really does make us accountable, right? So even looking at our breakfast that you wrote down at the beginning of our session can really help you look to see, what are we fueling our bodies with?
You said chia and sesame. I didn't get the third seed.
Flax seeds and hemp seeds. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, hi, Karina. Well, I guess
Hi.
going back is how bad is it? I mean, how bad is it to not really eat breakfast? I mean, for these kids to, I can, if I bring it in the car, and when they're bored on the drive to school, they'll pick at it. But, and then who knows what they're breaking their fast on, because now they're at school. So it's probably, let's just assume it's not great. But
are they eating the school lunches and stuff?
Yeah.
Do they have a snack?
They do
at
have a
school?
snack. snack time. So I could
Like, do
maybe
you
focus on,
you provide the snack or?
yeah, I could
Okay.
focus on giving a great snack maybe.
Yeah, I would give them breakfast for their snack. That's what I do. And like I said, my oldest doesn't like to eat breakfast. My middle one, she is like within 30 minutes, if she's not eating, she's like nauseous, like she has to eat. That's how I always was. But my oldest, he's just not like, he's just too sleepy. So, my husband Kai makes an amazing breakfast for the kids every morning, and if he doesn't eat, that's his snack for the day. So, I think it's really tricky with kids because we don't want to control too much, right? And depending on the age, we can start to really explain why we need to add protein or add fat. So my oldest now, when the youngest has a fit, he'll be like, "You ate jelly beans. That has food dye in it. That's why you're having a fit right now." Like, while we don't want to live in fear, like it's really important to know what foods, cause different reactions in our body. And so I try to talk to my kids, like, when they just eat. So for dinners, it's like they have their plate. I'm not a short order chef. They eat what's in front of them. They can eat as much as they want. They can eat as little as they want. They could eat any of it. They can eat all of it, whatever they want to eat, but they don't get any more of anything until their whole plate is empty. So like if we have pasta and they just eat the noodles, they have to eat all the sauce and veggies with it before they can get more noodles, right? So that's kind of my way of controlling the situation, but also giving them freedom. But what I tell them is if they just eat the noodles, I'll say things like, "Oh, but you didn't eat your protein. Like, you're going to be so hungry soon." Or I'll say things like, "Oh, like, you're not going to, like, you need your protein so that you can run really fast," or, things like that. So trying to get them to understand how food affects their body is going to be what I think is going to be the best, rather than always just like forcing them to eat this and that, really getting them to understand how the food affects their body. How about protein ideas if you don't eat much meat? It's really tricky. I'm a big fan of meat because it's much more easily digested. And the trouble I find with my clients that are more plant-based is most plant-based foods are very protein-rich foods are very high in carbs too. So when we think of like beans, they're either high in carbs or high in fat. So in order to get that protein up, you're then having to eat a lot of carbs. So it becomes really tricky to not eat a lot of animal-based proteins, and really regulate our blood sugar. I think it's one of those, like, plant-based is really good to help with digestion and gut health because you have lots of fiber usually. But I see often where it's lacking is blood sugar regulation. So I generally recommend my clients to eat more meat. Good quality meat, with animals that were treated well and lived happy lives as much as possible. Just because I do find it really hard to regulate our blood sugar with a lot of plant-based foods. I will say, there is that argument that, there's a lot of people who say like muscle, like bodybuilders and stuff that are plant-based that are advocating this. If you look at their diet, they're eating two sources of protein. They're eating soy and pea protein, and that's like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we know variety is really important to get a wide range of nutrients. So it's all just things to consider. Now, I'm not against any type of diet if it serves your body well. If you feel amazing on it, being plant-based, and for some people they just really don't do well with meat, I would first ask, is it that you don't do well with meat, or your digestion isn't working well, that you're not able to digest it? And if it is really that you just do better on plant-based and you have energy and you feel good, then stick with it. But it is, I find for my population, they tend to not digest food very well. And it's actually it's much harder to digest protein from plant-based sources. So that's my little spiel on that. But again, whatever works for you, I think is the most important, regardless of what anyone else says. So, Amina, you had a question? Oh, I think you're still on mute.
Thank you so much. So amazing. Yeah. I have two questions, but the first one, we usually have a lot of raw cashew nuts.
Mhm.
What is your opinion about that? And secondly, it's about one of my sons, my second son. When we came from a very hot country, tropical, my son, when he was born, when he was 3 months, he would not take, whenever I would give him, unless, for breast milk was okay. But milk, anything to do with milk, all proteins, milk, meat, fish, he would swell. He would get blisters all over the body.
Mm.
It was
Wow. Yeah.
so hard for us. But this boy adapted to onions. So
Only what?
onions, red onions.
Onions. Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he would eat a full bowl of onions. If he would go to the neighbor's place, like children playing, he would pick and eat all of them. Even pick an onion
Oh
with
my
its
gosh.
whatever and eat it.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Now, when we came here, because I was young, that was my second son. When we came to this country, he started eating all the proteins and he didn't develop any blisters again. I don't know whether it was the weather or what, and even stopped eating onions.
Oh, funny. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So how old was he when you moved here?
He was 7.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. So I'll answer the first question about cashews. You will get different opinions on whether or not nuts are good, whether or not meat is good, whether or not dairy, gluten, like everyone has different opinions on a lot of whole real foods. So this is where I would recommend is if the food is real whole food, right? It comes from the earth, it comes like in natural sources.
Mm.
I would say for most people, it's healthy and nutritious, and we want to eat as much variety as
Okay.
possible.
Mm.
There are certain people who say cashews, I think there's something in them, lectins, is it? I'm trying to remember. There's something in cashews that people say we shouldn't eat any cashews, or some people say they're a little bit higher in mold, things like that. So you'll get different opinions. I think cashews are just fine if your body does well with them. If you eat cashews and you feel gross and terrible after, then probably it's not for you. But it's one of those things that any food that's real whole foods is like a wonderful nutritious option unless it's proven otherwise in your body. So, or you have like specific health conditions that do better without that type of food. So, and then with your son, that is really fascinating. There is some babies and kids have there's some like conditions where you're not able to digest protein, especially with like babies and young kids. And he could have like had that and then just outgrown it is something that could have happened. Like a protein intolerance, they call it. And so that's like a medical condition that I don't necessarily like. You would need to work with a doctor for that, for people who have that kind of condition. It's a little bit outside of my scope other than helping them, come up with other foods. But I'm curious if maybe he had some kind of that protein intolerance and outgrew it.
Won't it ever come back? I don't know.
I don't know, but I mean, it's hard to say, but I think a lot of times that protein intolerance is more for like kids and babies specifically. But yeah,
Okay.
my son really couldn't tolerate dairy as a newborn and baby, so I wasn't able to produce enough milk, so we did half formula, half breast milk with him. And so when we started like a dairy-based formula, he literally would just completely throw it up. And if I ever ate even butter or anything, he would just throw up all the milk that he drank. And so for 9 months, we were strictly dairy free, and then he outgrew it. And now he's 11 now and has dairy all the time. So yeah, it's I think it's important. There's more information than ever about optimizing our health and nutrition and what's right and what's wrong. And I would say, your guiding factor or your guiding light should be first real whole foods and balancing your blood sugar, and then just like trusting your own intuition of what feels good in your body. Like everybody's body has different reactions and inflammation and all kinds of things. And so while there's so many different diets out there, they all address different needs. And so any diet that is real whole foods that you feel really good on means it's supporting your body well. And so that's where I can tell you all this advice, this whole presentation is great advice. Now go try it and see how you feel, right? Does it help? Does it not? You should feel good, and it should be working towards allowing you to live a more, thriving life. But with so much information, we do need to trust ourselves a little bit more in what is right for our own body. So,
Karina, this has been so educational and inspirational. I'm really grateful. Let's give Karina
thank you.
a round of applause. Thank you so much. And do you want to say any last words before we have announcements?
I think what I finished on was perfect. With all of this information, I just want you all to remember to tune into your own body and focus on what makes you feel best rather than take the information you hear from any nutrition expert and really tune in to, does that work in my life and does that help me feel better, and weed out the rest, but really tuning in and focusing on your own intuition. So yeah, thank you everyone. It's been wonderful talking with all of you.
Thanks so much, Karina. And get in touch with Karina if you have any other questions. Myrna's going to share some announcements with us. So take it away, Myrna.
Okay, so the main announcement is for next time. Uh-oh. Hold on 1 second. Somehow I didn't open up the so next time, Kendra Stein, who was on at the beginning, but she had to leave early, will be giving a presentation for us. Let me share the flyer. So Kendra is always busy reading and learning and growing. And so she's going to be doing a presentation based on the Gottman's book, which is called Fight Right, how to be able to resolve conflict and have healthy, successful relationships. I believe that this is true for whether it's with a spouse, with children, with friends. And so it will be on February 1st, at our usual time. But it'll be a little earlier. Usually we do it mid-month. And I guess the only other announcement is just that I will be sending out the newsletter, and so we'll have Karina's contact information in there and the flyer for next time for February 1st. And feel free to invite other people to join us. And so thank you again, Karina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Enjoy your weekend. And
Thank
eat well.
you. That was
Bye.
awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.